For 100 years, we had a word for them: brutish, primitive, a dead end. We put them in textbooks hunched and slack jawed. We turned their name into an insult. Stop being such a Neanderthal. And we told ourselves a clean, satisfying story. Modern humans arrived. Neanderthals couldn't compete. They disappeared. Case closed. Last week, scientists published a study that makes that story very hard to keep telling. They found proof, genetic proof, measurable and specific, that Neanderthals carried the biological hardware for complex language. Not grunts, not signals, language. The same capacity that lets you understand every word I'm saying right now. Here's what they found, and here's why it changes everything. Before we get to the science, let's get one thing straight. Neanderthals were not failed humans. They were not a rough draft that nature discarded. They lived in Europe and Western Asia for approximately 400,000 years. 400,000 years! To put that in perspective, the entire span of what we call recorded history, from the first writing to today, is roughly 6,000 years. Neanderthals outlasted that by 65 times over. They were built differently from us. Heavier, denser bones, broader faces with pronounced brow ridges. But they were our closest evolutionary relatives, close enough that when modern humans finally arrived in their territory, about 45,000 years ago, the two species interbred. We know this because the evidence is still in our bodies. If you have any ancestry outside of sub-Saharan Africa, somewhere between 1% and 4% of your genome is Neanderthal. Right now, those sequences are doing things inside you, helping regulate your immune system, your skin, your cold weather adaptations. They are still here. And last week, scientists discovered something new about what else they left behind. The study was published June 12th, 2026, in the journal Science Advances. The lead researchers were Jacob Michelson, a professor of psychiatry and neuroscience at the University of Iowa, and Lucas Kasten, now a postdoctoral researcher at the Max Planck Institute of Psychiatry in Munich. They were investigating something called HAQERs, Human Ancestor Quickly Evolved Regions. HAQERs are not genes. They're regulatory regions, tiny stretches of DNA that act like volume controls for the genes involved in brain development. They don't build the brain, they tune it. They turn certain developmental pathways up or down. And here's the thing that caught the researchers' attention. HAQERs make up less than 0.1% of the human genome. Less than 1/10 of 1%. But when the team ran the analysis, when they measured how much each portion of the genome actually predicted language ability in the 350 people they studied, the result was extraordinary. HAQERs drove approximately 200 times more impact on language ability than any other region of the genome. 200 times, from less than 0.1% of the DNA. What we're seeing, Michelson said, is how a very small part of the genome can have an outsized influence, not just on who we were as a species, but on who we are as individuals. Think of it this way. Building a brain capable of language is like building a concert hall. You need the architecture, the walls, the ceiling, the stage, the basic structure that makes sound possible at all. But architecture alone doesn't make music extraordinary. What makes the difference is the acoustics, the fine tuning, the precise shaping of how sound moves through the space. HAQERs are the acoustics. They don't build the brain, they shape how it develops. They tune the pathways that make language possible, turning up the sensitivity in regions involved in speech processing, social cognition, and communication. Michelson described it this way. These regions act like the volume knob on genes, and FOXP2, the gene already known to play a major role in language ability, is one of the hands that turns those volume knobs. FOXP2 was discovered in the 1990s, famously linked to a family in England where multiple members had severe language impairments due to a mutation in this single gene. It was the first gene ever directly connected to human language, and hackers appear to regulate it. They are the mechanism that fine tunes the fine tuner, and the researchers trace these regions back through 65 million years of evolutionary history to find out exactly when they emerged. What they found stopped everyone in the room. The HAQERs were already there, in Neanderthals, not a simplified version, not a precursor. The researchers found that these genetic volume controls for language ability were present in Neanderthal DNA and may have been even slightly more pronounced in Neanderthals than they are in modern humans today. Let that land for a moment. The genetic hardware that makes language possible. Hardware so powerful it predicts 200 times more language ability than any other part of the genome, was present, fully formed, in a species that went extinct 40,000 years ago. We can say that humans at least had the hardware for language earlier than what we previously thought, Michelson said in the study's release, earlier than previously thought. What that means, the biological foundation for complex language didn't emerge with Homo sapiens. It predates the split between modern humans and Neanderthals. It's older than our species. We didn't invent language hardware, we inherited it from something even older than us. And Neanderthals didn't lack this inheritance. They carried it just as we did, perhaps even more strongly. The question was never whether they had the hardware. The question is what they did with it. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. If HAQERs are so powerfully beneficial, if they're the primary biological driver of language ability, why did they stop evolving? Every other aspect of human brain development continued improving across hundreds of thousands of years. Intelligence, memory, social cognition. The genetic signals for these kept changing, but hackers reached a certain level and essentially stayed there. Why? The researchers believe the answer is a biological trade off, and it involves childbirth. Hackers influence fetal brain development in ways that increase brain and skull size. Larger skull, more language hardware, more language hardware, greater communication ability. On paper, more evolution in this direction should produce better outcomes. But there's a ceiling. Before modern medicine, there was a hard physical limit to how large an infant's skull could be before it became impossible or fatal to deliver. Every step toward a larger language ready brain was also a step toward a more dangerous birth. We think that early humans maxed out this pathway, Michelson said, and hit that ceiling pretty early on, then remained stable, while other aspects of brain development that improve intelligence but don't directly affect fetal brain size continued to evolve. Human evolution reached a point where the cost of better language hardware was the deaths of mothers and children. And so it stopped. The volume was set, and it has remained roughly the same in us and in them for hundreds of thousands of years. The DNA evidence doesn't stand alone. Archaeology has been quietly building the same case for decades. It has just been easier to ignore. Neanderthals painted caves. The oldest known cave paintings in Europe, in Cueva de Ardeles in Spain, are 65,000 years old. Modern humans didn't reach Europe until 45,000 years ago. Someone else made those paintings, and that someone was almost certainly Neanderthal. They buried their dead. Multiple Neanderthal burial sites have been found across Europe and Western Asia, some containing deliberately placed flowers, red ochre pigment, and personal objects alongside the body. The intentionality is not in dispute. They made jewelry, pierced eagle talons, likely worn as pendants, found at the Krapina site in Croatia, are 130,000 years old, 80,000 years before the first known modern human jewelry. They made adhesive, birch tar, a material requiring a multi step manufacturing process and sustained fire at precise temperatures, found on Neanderthal stone tools. This isn't instinct, this is planning. Now add the genetics. They had the FOXP2 gene in the same form we do. They had HAQERS as we do. They had the anatomy for complex vocalization. At what point does the evidence become impossible to dismiss? Here is what science can't give us, and what I keep thinking about: the sound of it. If Neanderthals had the hardware for language, if they had the vocal anatomy, the FOXP2 regulation, the HAQERS tuning their developing brains, then somewhere, 60,000 or 80,000 or 100,000 years ago, in a cave in what is now France or Germany or Spain, a Neanderthal said something to another Neanderthal. Not a warning call, not a grunt. Something with structure, with meaning that persisted across the gap between two minds. Maybe it was a name, maybe it was a direction. The herd moved north. The river is frozen past the third hill. We move at dawn. Maybe it was a story. The time the cave lion came and Marak drove it back alone. The winter when the food disappeared and what they did to survive. Stories are how humans pass knowledge across generations. They are the original technology, the first form of cultural memory. If Neanderthals had language, they had stories. And every one of those stories, every name, every warning, every memory passed from parent to child across 400,000 years of Neanderthal survival, is gone. Completely, permanently, irretrievably gone. The language is gone, but the hardware that made it possible is not. It's in you. The researchers at the University of Iowa are still working with the original study participants from the 1990s. Many of them now have children of their own. The team wants to understand how language ability is passed down, what comes from genetics, and what comes from the environment a parent creates. Because hackers don't just explain Neanderthal language, they explain language variation in living people, in you, right now. Why some people learn languages easily, why some children pick up speech faster than others. The same ancient hardware that Neanderthals carried is still doing its work, still shaping, still tuning, still turning those developmental volume knobs in the brains of children being born today. There is a Neanderthal contribution to that story, to your story, and to mine. We spent a century calling them primitive. We were describing ourselves in the mirror, and we didn't recognize the face. If this changed how you think about Neanderthals, wait until you hear what scientists just discovered about the Denisovans, another human species even more mysterious than Neanderthals. We know almost nothing about them. A finger bone, a few teeth, trace DNA. But that DNA has turned up in populations across Asia and the Pacific in ways that completely upend what we thought we knew about how humans spread across the world. That video is next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if this one was worth watching, share it. Most people still believe Neanderthals were primitive. Help them update the file.